Hello everyone, welcome back to Trek-A-Day. Today we're going to take a look at the Star Trek Short Treks. This is the DVD release. The collection was released on DVD and Blu-ray, including all but one of the short treks. The last one in relation to the beginning of Star Trek Picard. You had to get the first season of Star Trek Picard to get that one, which I thought was kind of a silly idea to not include it. And the short treks were released in two groups. First one in between the first and second season of Star Trek Discovery, and then again in the lead up to the release of Star Trek Picard. And they're a bit of an oddity, and one that I find fascinating because this is a concept that I always thought had so much potential with Star Trek, and I really wish that it had continued, even though, as I'll discuss, it's a little bit mixed in the results with these ones that actually did come out. The idea of a Star Trek anthology series, lots of little individual one-off stories within this vast universe. There is limitless potential, so much variety and creativity, and just the time frame stories could take place in, all these cultures we love to explore that maybe you can't within the confines of a main, ongoing series. Even one that's more episodic still has to focus on that main cast, and with an anthology series you could get something that focuses on one-off characters, even a crew of Klingons, people on the Trill homeworld, like anything you could possibly think of. You could have a really cool kind of one-off story, and I hope this idea comes back at some point because, again, I think there's so much they could do with it. This batch, though, as I said, is a little mixed. And part of it is that when I picture an anthology series like this, I think of classic anthology series, stuff like The Twilight Zone. Shows that feel like they are the equivalent to a science fiction short story, stuff that you would see in the old science fiction magazines or those annual collections that would be printed of the best of whatever given year. That type of complete little encapsulated story in the form of a television episode. And some of these, I think, accomplish that, and others feel more like some momentary filler, just something that feels like a little extra feature clip rather than something deserving of an episode of an ongoing anthology series. And two that really stick out in that are the first one, Runaway, and then Q&A. Runaway, the brief little story focusing on Tilly, and then Q&A, which has Una and Spock, as long as referenced in the series as well. There are moments in the Turbolift, and both of them have their positive aspects. Q&A, especially at the time as we were first getting our glimpses of this Enterprise iteration before the launch of the full-fledged Strange New Worlds series. It was a cute little moment with these two characters, but again, that's all it really was. It felt more like an extra feature type moment rather than an episode, and the same thing with Runaway, just felt like this little filler thing that didn't really add anything to the character. It was just a fun little moment if you happen to enjoy those characters. Nothing really more than that. In comparison to my two favorites by a wide margin, Calypso and The Brightest Star, which I think these two truly encapsulate that vision of what a Star Trek anthology show can be. They both feel like these great little science fiction short stories that can and do have connections to the greater picture, but can also work completely in isolation as their own little science fiction stories. And The Brightest Star stands out the most to me because I felt that it included all the elements of Star Trek that I felt were missing from Discovery. A truly fascinating, brief examination of a very alien culture in a way that encapsulated a scientific curiosity and a look at a character who's looking up to the stars, who is wondering what else is out there, and generating this sense of curiosity, and made great use of Saru's character And just overall, I felt like these two were incredibly strong and easily my favorites of the group. I also felt like Ask Not was a great example, too, something you could take these one-off little episodes with young officers or cadets in a testing simulation, any kind of situation like that, breathing life into a little minor character in an interesting moment. And I just think that one worked really well as one that should not have worked. The Trouble with Edward is so bizarre. This is the one where science officer Edward Larkin tries to solve a food shortage on a planet by adding human DNA to tribbles. And the whole thing is this weird comedic story that just, so many elements of it feel bizarre and frankly kind of stupid, but somehow it ends up being really entertaining. It's one that I'm so mixed on because I kind of don't want to like it, but I do like it. It's very weird. It's a weird little one-off, but again, with this type of show, that anthology type environment, you can kind of experiment with tone and you can experiment with weird out there ideas, and sometimes they're going to work, sometimes they're not. So it's kind of a weird one that is an odd mix of things I think really worked and things that didn't, but overall ended up being just kind of a little bit of fun. And then two that I felt could have worked in concept, but really just kind of didn't for me. We had the Ephraim and Dot and the Girl Who Made the Stars. Both had interesting ideas to work with. I think the former did a little bit of a better job, and moving into different types of animation as well as an interesting idea, but both of them ultimately felt a little forgettable. They felt like they were undercooked, like they were ideas that weren't quite ready for full production, and ultimately they're ones that I've seen them both, and I don't know if I'll ever go back to them, but they were at least felt like a little more creativity and a little bit more worth the time in comparison to things like Runaway and Q&A. Even though those two I think turned out better, I think conceptually these bottom two could have been better. They just weren't. And then the one that I just truly dislike. So we have a couple that I think are forgettable, a couple that, Ask Not and Trouble with Edward, that are pretty decent. They're something little mixed, but they're okay. Calypso and The Brightest Star, which I thought were fantastic. And then the one I absolutely cannot stand, we have The Escape Artist. It's not outright terrible in the quality of the production, and I do think this is a little bit better of an interpretation of Harry Mudd than what is seen in Discovery proper. At the same time, I cannot get behind this Harry Mudd reinterpretation. I remember when Discovery was first airing and that character was first shown, and my father-in-law and I were talking about just we absolutely hated it. It really feels like this reinterpretation of Harry Mudd is this disdainful abomination that trades the charming levity of that original character's playful mischievousness for some kind of awkwardly quirky malevolence. I just really, really dislike this reinterpretation of that character, and I can't see through that to the good points of The Escape Artist. So overall, no, don't like that one. So again, overall, it's a big mix. The last one, which is not included in the set, I really liked on its own, and I thought it was a great tie-in to the beginning of Star Trek Picard, but even more so to the novels that lead up to the beginning of Star Trek Picard. Some of the books that take place before the start of that series are really, really fantastic, and I think that short actually ties into them even better than the series proper. So that one was pretty good. The Girl Who Made the Stars and the Ephraim and Dot were, again, a little forgettable. Escape Artist did not like. Runaway and Q&A for me were just kind of one-off little time wasters, even though they, especially with Q&A, have little moments, little charming bits to them. Trouble with Edward and Ask Not, I think, were good. And then Calypso and Brightest Star, absolutely loved. So it was such a weird mix, but the one thing I do appreciate, even with the ones that I was a little bit more lukewarm on or disliked outright, I did appreciate the variety in the attempt at this short story Star Trek anthology television series. So even in the ones that I did not personally like, I still enjoyed the attempt at the variety, and it's an idea that I really wish had continued.